Parsik Hill, rising between the ever-bustling regions of Thane and Navi Mumbai, seems ordinary enough during the day, a patch of green forest scarred by quarrying, dotted with temples, half-built apartments, and stray dogs napping in the shade. But as night falls, it transforms into something that feels older and darker than the city around it, something that waits and watches. Both were fascinated by abandoned places and local legends, and they spoke of Parsik Hill as if it were a living puzzle. Mira told him about an abandoned villa she and Kunal had found deep in the forested slope. The structure loomed like a blackened skeleton against the sky, its windows hollow and watching. Days later, Kunal read on social media that a body had been found hanging from a tree in a dense part of Parsik's forest, not far from where they had fled. The road was slick with rain, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. As they entered the tunnel, their car's headlights illuminated the narrow, dripping walls, and immediately, their phones lost all signal. The tunnel was long and suffocating, the kind of place where sound doesn't carry properly, where you feel cut off from the world outside. Halfway through, the car's engine sputtered. Ayash cursed, twisting the key, but the vehicle stalled. For a moment, all they could hear was the hiss of rainwater dripping from cracks in the ceiling. Then, faintly, from the darkness ahead, came a voice. A whisper. "Why are you here?" Myra let out a small cry, clutching Kunal's arm. The headlights flickered, and for a brief, heart-stopping second, they saw her, the woman in white. She stood in the middle of the tunnel, her face a pale blur, her eyes blank and unseeing. She lifted one hand, pointing directly at them. The lights died. Darkness swallowed everything. Ayash slammed his foot on the pedal. The car roared back to life and they sped out of the tunnel, not daring to look back until they burst into the open night air. When they finally stopped, gasping, the only sign of what they'd seen was a set of fresh scratches on the car's hood, deep and jagged, as if clawed by something trying to hold them back. It wasn't the first body found there. Locals whispered of delivery boys and wanderers who never returned, of murders covered up by dumping victims deep in the woods. But the hill, they felt, had followed them. Mira kept hearing whispers outside her window at night, words she couldn't understand but that filled her with cold fear. Kunal started waking at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, certain someone was standing in his room, though when he turned on the light, he was alone. Ayash stopped riding late at night altogether, but once when he passed the base of the hill in broad daylight, he swore he saw the same white-clad woman standing on the steps of the People Tree Temple watching him without eyes. The hill, they realized, wasn't just a place. It was a shadow that reached into their minds, into their lives, a lingering presence that would never quite let them go. People still speak of Parsik Hill as if it's just another urban patch of greenery, but those who have felt its darkness know better. They know that after sunset, the hill belongs to something else, something that sees, waits, and remembers. Sometimes, after heavy rains, bones would surface in the mud, washed down by the torrents. The three friends tried to shake off the sense of dread, but it clung to them like the humidity in the air. Mira started dreaming of the villa, of that dark shadow moving silently through the halls. Ayash swore he heard footsteps in his own house at night, though no one was there. And once he found muddy footprints on his balcony, though it hadn't rained. As they approached, the temperature dropped noticeably, and a smell like damp earth and rust filled their noses. Kunal pushed the gate open with a loud creak, and they slipped inside. The villa's interior was worse than Mira had described. Furniture lay smashed in corners, and the walls were stained with watermarks that looked disturbingly like handprints. In one room, they found a small altar. It's covered in dust but still holding a cracked idol of a goddess, her face worn smooth, her eyes hollow. "This feels wrong," Ayash muttered. As if to agree, the air grew heavier, and somewhere deep in the house, a door slammed shut. They froze, the sound echoing through the empty corridors. Then came the whispers, again faint, almost like breathing. Mira clutched Ayash's arm. "We need to go," she said, her voice trembling. But as they turned, something moved at the far end of the hallway. It was a shadow, darker than the darkness, gliding toward them. They didn't wait to see what it was. They ran, stumbling over broken tiles, crashing through the gate and down the path until their lungs burned and their legs shook. A massive structure with broken windows and vines creeping over its walls, guarded by men who seemed more like silent statues than human beings. It was as if they weren't guarding the house, she said, her voice hushed, but guarding whatever was inside. The pair had managed to slip past one rainy night, creeping through the underbrush until they found a side door hanging loose on rusted hinges. Inside, the air was cold, far colder than it should have been, and the rooms were filled with strange carvings and faded graffiti. In one of the hallways, someone had scratched words into the plaster leaf now. "Not your place" letters so deep, they seemed almost carved with desperation. As they moved further in, Kunal's flashlight flickered and died. Though the battery had been new, and Mira swore she heard someone whispering in a language she couldn't understand. Then, from the far end of the hallway, they heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. They fled, stumbling through the mud until they reached the road again, where the guards stood watching, silent and unmoving. "I felt like the house didn't want us there," Mira said, her eyes wide. Ayesh, who had already felt the weight of unseen eyes on his ride, believed her. The hill is more than a landmark. It's a breathing presence to those who dare to cross it after dusk. A place where the wind groans like a living thing and shadows move against the dim glow of streetlights. A few nights later, under a bruised purple sky, heavy with monsoon clouds, they climbed the narrow path leading up the hill. The city lights flickered below, but up here, the only illumination came from their torches and the occasional glimmer of lightning far in the distance. The road was eerily quiet. At the base of the People Tree Temple, a shrine known for strange sightings, Ayesh stopped. He remembered hearing from a local chai vendor that a ghostly woman had been seen here, perched on the steps, her white sari glowing faintly in the dark. Her face an empty void. "She doesn't walk," the vendor had said. "She glides, and then she's gone." As they stood there, Mira suddenly stiffened. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Ayesh strained his ears. At first, there was only the distant rustle of leaves. But then, faintly, there came the sound of anklets, the soft chime of metal on stone, as if someone were slowly climbing the steps toward them. His torch beam trembled as he aimed it upward. Nothing, just the wind. And then, as quickly as it had come, the sound stopped. The three of them didn't linger. They hurried on. Drivers on Palm Beach Road whisper about the moments when headlights flicker for no reason. When the rearview mirror shows a tall figure standing just on the edge of vision, vanishing as soon as they dare to look back. Ayesh, a 24-year-old rider from Narelle, had never believed the horror stories his friends traded late at night, tales of a woman in white with cloudy, pupilless eyes appearing near the old People Tree Temple, or of bikers who heard footsteps chasing them, even when the road behind was empty. Yet on one humid summer night, while he was riding back from Bellapore, his scooter's engine stuttered near the hill's entrance. He stopped, muttering curses, but his words died in his throat. When his headlight beam illuminated a crumbling villa, the kind people say is haunted. A security guard stood by the gate, perfectly still, not even blinking. Ayesh felt a prickle at the back of his neck and sped past. But just before he turned his head, he glimpsed another shape, something darker and taller than a man, standing in the villa's archway. When he glanced again, it was gone. That ride home marked the start of his unease. The first of many sleepless nights, filled with dreams of silent corridors and unseen eyes watching from the corners. The haunted reputation of Parsik Hill is no modern invention. Old-timers in Navi Mumbai say that even before the massive British-built Parsik Railway Tunnel cut through the hill in 1916, the hill had always been considered a place of ill omens. Legends say strange fires were once seen burning on its slopes, and that travelers who tried to cross the hill alone after dark sometimes disappeared without a trace, only to be found days later, wandering aimlessly, unable to remember what had happened. The tunnel itself, a feat of engineering nearly a century old, has its own unsettling presence. Even in the middle of the day, stepping into it is like walking into another world. Dark, damp throat of rock where sound behaves strangely, where footsteps echo in unnatural patterns and where mobile signals die completely, leaving travelers with nothing but the hum of the train and their own pounding heartbeat. More than one passenger has claimed to have seen a pale face in the shadows of the tunnel, just beyond the reach of the yellow lights, a face that stares and then melts back into the darkness. A conductor, when pressed, admitted that people sometimes panic for no reason as the train nears the far end of the tunnel, as if something unseen follows them through the darkness. Ayash might have dismissed his encounter as imagination had it not been for Myra and Kunal, a pair of urban explorers he met at a tea stall near the hill one evening. The three of them decided, against their better judgment, to return together. The path curved around the slope, leading them closer to the abandoned villa Myra and Kunal had explored. The hill wasn't finished with them. Their final test came one stormy night when they decided, recklessly, to drive through the Parsik tunnel itself. From that night on, none of them returned to Parsik Hill.